This is the only time that it's actually scripted, so buckle up.
Hey everyone, welcome to this a bit different video, which was totally the plan and not a result of me procrastinating my actual anniversary plans. Have a drink and sit down, because today we'll be hosting the proper Q&A for the Dr. Megalo AU.
Not in character, I feel like I didn't make that clear enough. I'm very, very sorry.
Before delving into the main meat of things, I also thought it'd be a good chance to say thank you so much for 20,000 subs on YouTube. It is incredible how fast this channel grew over the span of a year. It'd be fun to see how much more one can do with this channel, and who knows, maybe in the process I don't have a horrendous upload schedule. Anyway, for this anniversary, I asked you both on Twitter and YouTube for questions while leaving the straw page as a way to ask anonymously. And... okay, so when I asked for questions before the Undertale boom, I was very used to there not being any questions or very minimal, so I was not quite sure how many I would get.
And I may have made some miscalculations.
So, because of the amount of questions I got, I decided to first start with a general questions section. Topics that were asked the most and kind of summarizing them neatly into one package. So if you don't see your questions pop up, it's probably lumped into that, sorry. I'm also not gonna answer questions that are like within the text of the AU unless it's vague enough to warrant an answer. Like, I did not make it an entire megadoc for shits and giggles, it's right there for your convenience. Let's start with a surprisingly often asked question. Gaster. The kind of questions vary on the exact purpose of them, but the general gist I have seen is the question if Gaster could do something in the story or what he really does, and the general nature of the Goners. I explained it in the doc, but to summarize it, Gaster is not in the story physically. He's, as we all know, shattered across time and space within the void. So what Alpha sees is a consequence of her messing with the world's rules, looking beyond the possible, or beyond the code. In a way, she starts to have a similar affinity to look into the world's makeup like Frisk, which results in her being able to see Gaster. But Gaster isn't really doing anything but warn her, in a fucked up sleep paralysis demon way, but warning nonetheless. He's pretty neutral in terms of morality, but his purpose is less in a character sense and more symbolically, that if Alphys pursues her obsession with power with her experiments, she might fall into the same fate as Gaster has. In short, Gaster is an omen, not a character. As for what happens to them after finale, Alphys could see them still, but only when she's really stressed, and even then Gaster would be cooking eggs or something. If you want to write him in like fan stuff to be more important, you go right ahead, but Gaster has always had a tendency in the fandom to take over Alphys a bit, so canonically at least, let her have her shine, you know? Second questions. AUs. I'm going to be very honest with you. I was much more invested in AUs back in 2016, and even then I had no real clue what the stories are actually about. I mean, hell, I was not aware of there being like, what, 20 different Dusttail AU variations? I can't exactly answer with full confidence what would happen if this and that character met. That, I think, I would leave to you to figure out. Similar to power scaling, so many people asked how a fight between Alphys and the other Sans variations would go about fighting her and who would win and the such, especially with Murder Sans. And look, I am not the power scaling son. I am out of my depth for these discussions. It's not something I have fun with, to be honest, so I can't give a sincere answer. I did provide as much info on Alphys' abilities in the Megadoc as best as I could, but it was never written with power scaling in mind. Like... I thought level 99 was a ridiculous enough of a number to just get across how dangerous Alphys has gotten, and people got their calculators out on how minimal that actually is. I am a storyteller first and a WWE commentator dead last. I'd need to know the exact circumstances, progression, story, the purpose of the fight in the first place, and a million other things in order to give even remotely a satisfying answer. Don't get me wrong, I sorta get the appeal, but I think it's just not something I can give a proper answer to. Going back to the AU topic though, there is of course always the fun possibility of Aerith showing up to see what the hell is going on here. I think it would make enough sense for him to seek out the AU rather than Alphys going after AUs herself at first. She's messing with the original code after all, so that would of course get Aerith's attention, who is oh so autistic about the original Undertale timeline. So I think a fun fight with Alphys and Aerith could be fun to explore, only for her to take advantage of his dimension hopping abilities to seek out other AUs as well. In her mind, she'd be looking for other AUs with similar Alphyses to help her perhaps, and she would have the biggest catastrophic crash out realizing 90% of AUs are Sans-centered. What exactly would you do? probably tried to make her own AU probably, while still trying to destroy her own universe, as at that point there's no point in wasting her time with the human she so clearly hates. I think Doki-sans would go after her and have a similar journey with Underverse, but obviously a bit different. Going a bit specific with the Dusttail variants, Alphys would somewhat respect Murder for actually doing something, but her feelings of betrayal on her Sans would not let her like a single Sans no matter how aligned they would be in morality. I also don't think she'd like being around Gaster variants either, as that would just make her feel uncomfortable. She'd probably see them highly, but never to work with them. In terms of team-up, the Fel Alphas, X-Tail Alphas, and Dr. Megalo Alphas are the most likely to occur. Maybe, I don't know, this is the best you're gonna get from me. Okay, so for the rest of the questions, I decided to just read it out with OBS, because I feel like it'll be easier to actually scroll through, and also maybe show my face a little bit again that isn't within the stream, and also show you that I got a mic arm. Finally, I still don't know how to not make the mic peak. I still haven't figured it out yet. It's a bit of a process. I got a pop filter. The mic arm is not as flexible as I wished it was. I had specifically gotten for Blue Yeti because I knew if I was going to get a general one, I was not gonna figure out how to actually implement it myself properly, so this is the best we got. So anyway, so everything else we're going to answer together as a group. And I hope you will have fun being in this group project together. Okay, so we're gonna start with the straw pages because those were the most. I had specifically set to add a queue, but I think not most people didn't notice it, so I'm just gonna start off from where I think the questions started. Anyway, so when Alphys decides to start increasing her love to become stronger, did you try to bring any other characters onto her side? Not like how she controlled Mettaton, but like a comrade to become stronger with. Okay, interesting wording here. So the whole point of the introduction of Dr. Megalo is to kind of show why she doesn't, in a way. Like, the first person she's going to is, of course, Sans, who knows about timelines and stuff, and, you know, he immediately, like, dips. And the second time she tries to have, like, someone to work with, which is Undyne, and, yeah, that didn't go well. So at this point, she's like,
You know what? I think I'm done. I'm just... Mettaton, come over here. Just come over here for a second. It's really, really cool. Trust me.
was there something between Alphys and Sans, or are they just friends? And then, Undyne could do nothing to try to talk sense into Alphys. I mean, when Alphys started taking advantage of the resets, Undyne couldn't help her, or were they not close, not a couple? Nah, I think it's better if it's like friends and stuff. Like, I feel like it's important when a story is a bit more focused on a friendship once in a while. Like, don't get me wrong, I see the vision, but first of all, I am an Alphine shipper first. It is in my heart as well, but I also think the main focus of this AU really is between the lost friendship between Sans and Alphys, and I feel like bringing in a romance in there would kind of damage it a little bit. Not to mention that Undyne does do something in the finale that breaks through to her as well. It's just that Sans started it, but you know, you can't just throw away a sapphic relationship like that. Come on. If someone were to make a free Dr. Megalo game, would you let them do it without prior notice? Oh, absolutely. Just go ahead. Just do it. It's fine. I mean, the only problem that I would have with it is if it was like something that would get monetized or something, but I wouldn't even be able to monetize it because it's Undertale related. I do try to figure out myself how to like get it monetized for myself in certain ways, but this is like a fan game. This is not something that anybody can monetize because of its nature. But I generally do hope that you have luck, and you know, if there's like some crowdfunding or something, I also don't really care. But you know, if you want commissions from me personally for like art and stuff, do not be afraid to ask me, right? I'm always open.
With money.
How does it feel to create such a badass evil Alphys? I won't lie, when creating my multiverse, I was in a blog trying to come up with an evil Alphys AU, and behold, it's like you were sent from the gods of heaven. Okay, so this question comes quite often, where it's like, how do you make an AU? What's the steps to do it in an AU? And to be honest, I don't know. It's like, I don't know if this is like the same thing for other people, but I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that when you make a story in general, you have to, it needs to come from a place of genuine curiosity, like, okay, what do I actually want to happen? What is the thing? Like, the whole thing with Dr. Megalo was like the whole aspect of, okay, but how would I approach a Dust Tail AU? And I was just trying to come up with ideas as to what it could be like, and somewhere along the way I just thought, wait, Alphys has like knowledge about timelines and this stuff, and you could like come up with some headcanons about how the amalgamates work that is like not as clear. So really, it's all about just getting a bit curious of a, okay, this is good.
But what if?
That's all it really is. The storytelling is always just going to be a massive rambling. That's all it really is. So if you really want to figure out how to make an AU and stuff, just brainstorm a bunch of shit and see what sticks, right? Just don't overthink it. Just whatever you're curious about. It can be the stupidest shit ever, and you're gonna find something, okay? Just let yourself be a bit stupid along the way, and you're gonna get somewhere. I kind of ignored the actual question. Why evil alphas? Well, I just thought it'd be cool. And, you know, I had a lot of fun designing her as well. I think there's a question coming up about that. How did Sans figure out he's trans, and what were other reactions? So for those who are not in the know, Dr. Megalo Sans is in fact trans. Like, not just coded, he is trans. How did others figure out? Okay, so I think if you ask him about it, he's gonna be a bit nonchalant about it, but he's not gonna go out of his way to, like, tell people. I think it's just something that he just kind of keeps to himself, you know, part of his personality, right? I like to think that the only people who actually really do know that he's Sans, that he's trans is Papyrus, obviously, and also Asgore, and Alphys, of course. Alphys mostly because, you know, they're close friends, Papyrus because it's his brother, and Asgore, I think, is something that he kind of had to disclose maybe as needing to work as a judge, so it's not like common knowledge. I like to think that when he gave Frisk his purse or something, or like his painkillers, he just never explained to Frisk what these are for, and so Frisk is like the entire time thinking about wait, why does he need that? Somewhere in finale he would like probably explain it, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Well, not literally. So Frisk doesn't speak. What is Dr. Megalo Frisk's major in college? Did they choose a major in the post-finale or remain undecided to explore the options? I don't quite remember what I gave as an original answer, but social science would probably be their major, and their minor is definitely quantum physics for, you know, obvious sense-related reasons. But I do think they would want to, like, redeem themselves a little bit, and so they would go into more social sciences just to figure out how to, like, give back to the community in some way. Maybe, like, consider doing some extra work to be a bit more politically involved in that kind of way. You know, maybe not being a monster ambassador anymore, but, you know, still carrying on the spirit of it. There are a lot of questions about finale, which really surprised me. I didn't realize people like that, to be honest. Did Undyne find Alphys' melty monster form kinda hot? Look.
Girls have needs.
How are the other monsters post-Megalo? I'm assuming you mean finale. Most monsters are okay, but in the doc there is a section where it's talking about how the multiple deaths across resets that are like, you know, more corrupted because of Alphys have kind of affected them, so all of them have a bit of a brain fog going on in their lives. Only in the bad route do they actually fall down from, like, the amount of stress that their body has kind of gone through with all these things, but they're mostly okay, but occasionally they do have nightmares, and there is a few monsters that start to kind of recall some of the events. Not directly, but more of like a distant memory. You know how in Undertale, characters would have like sort of memories, but they wouldn't actually be able to recall it, like the deja vu. They would like start having deja vu moments, so similar to that, but a little stronger, where it starts to impede their lives a little bit, but they are fine. No one's mentally well, but they're fine. If you were in the monster's place, would you be able to forgive Frisk and or Alphys, assuming you knew as much as the reader? This is quite a discussion I've seen quite often, and if I had to be honest, I think I would be like, I wouldn't want to meet them. Like, just straight up, I wouldn't want to have anything to do with them, right? But I would have, if I knew as much as I could, okay, if I only saw like the recordings and the stuff and knew what Alphys and Frisk did, then obviously I would be like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with it. if I had literally no idea about anything else, I think I would have still a tiny bit of empathy with Frisk, because I don't know about you, but whenever, I mean, even when I see in the news when like a child does something really horrendous and something, I'm like, yes, I feel like, oh my god, this child is awful, but a part of me does feel really bad, because I'm like, how did it get to that, you know? No, so I would still have a tiny bit of empathy, even if it's like, I know this is like something not everyone is going to agree on, and that's fine, but there is always going to be a place of, I wish this didn't happen to them, because I know this is not something that just happens, right? It needs to come from somewhere, and that does hurt me a little bit personally. For Alphys, if I literally didn't know anything else except for her actions, then I think I would be a bit more critical of her, because she's an adult and all that. But of course, as the writer, I did try to write her in a sympathetic manner. It's not like I wrote her to be an irredeemable villain or something, but yeah, if I was just in a monster's place, I would probably be a little bit more pissy about it. How do you feel about fan creations based on Dr. Megalo as, say, comics or animations? Awesome. That's awesome, even though I haven't really seen that many. Maybe I'm not looking in the right places, but whenever I'm like checking on Twitter, which I'm honestly doing too much, I'm actually not seeing that many, so I'm assuming it's either maybe in other places that I just don't look often, like Reddit, or maybe even AO3 or something, I don't know. But in general, I think it's really cool, like especially that one animation of like the furry versions of Dr. Megalo. That's really cool. If I find it, I'll put it in the description. You go check it out. It's really cute. It's also really well done too. Like animating is already terrible in and of itself. Doing it with animals, like fuck, mad respect. What's your favorite moment in Dr. Megalo? Papyrus's note, hands down. It's out of character in general, it has been my favorite inclusion of Dr. Megalo, but the note of Papyrus is specifically what started wanting to make the comic in the first place. Like the idea of like a genocide note of Papyrus, like that jump-started everything, and I'm so glad that so many people like this as well, including the swearing bit before that. I'm glad people had at least somewhat fun with it as well. How were you inspired to make a comic? Through very dumb decisions and a very bad take, mostly. I'm not gonna hide it because I feel like it's important to acknowledge when you fucked up or something, but I was like kind of lamenting about how Dust Tale, the way I perceived it, was a little cringe or something, and then of course many people were like, went like, well, actually, in a lighthearted way, and I actually learned a little bit more about the AU, and I'm glad that people said something, because it is an interesting AU. Still not what I personally would go with in terms of with Sans, but it was still interesting to see, and that kind of devolved into a bit of a brainstorming about, okay, if I wanted to make a Dust Tale AU, what would I actually do? Like, what's the approach for it? And that's kind of the inspiration that came from it, I guess. Specifically for Alphys, I thought it would give her also some spotlight, so it'd be kind of cute with her, right? You don't see evil Alphys as much as you should, to be honest. I mean, a scientist, like, it's all going to Gaster, man. Just give Alphys something. How'd you come up with Alphys' design? So I made a section in the Mega Doc for the design, and it's basically a mixture of Flowey's themes and Gaster's themes. To be honest, the Gaster elements are a little bit by accident, especially the glasses. The glasses are by far the funniest bit, because once I noticed what I did there, I had to exploit it, because that was by complete accident. It was just so perfect. The general gist of her design was just to seem like an evil scientist, and have her like horn things be resemblance of how I personally draw Flowey. I have to specifically say this because my Flowey petals are a little spikier than they are in the actual game, and I didn't notice this until recently, to be honest. Look, art styles are weird. If you want to have a thorough look into how it's designed, you can just look at the notes, because I feel like just explaining and regurgitating what I already wrote down is just not benefiting anybody. If you could go back and change anything about the comic, what would you change? I think if there's one thing that I would have wished to have done is give a bit more emphasis on Metaton. That's probably my biggest regret in this. I've said this from the very beginning, but the reason why I don't want to make a proper comic of it is because I knew I was going to focus way more on Sans. And to be honest, even on my private drawings that I do once in a while where, you know, I'm sketching something for like self-indulgence, it's very focused on Sans, and that would be too much of a detriment of the AU because it's about Sans and Alphys together. And Mettaton as well has such a strong connection with Alphys, and he got, to be honest, the reason I made him like a bot was like it had like such emotional weight to it, but I didn't really commit to the emotional turmoil with it. And I do think of like doing like a little mini music video with it, but it's like that shit's not gonna get monetized, so I have to like do it in a time where I can like afford to like just fuck around and find out with that kind of thing. But yeah, I think the emphasis on Mettaton would have been preferred, but to be honest, it's also because I love Mettaton. He's not my favorite character. And like among all the character in main cast, I think Mettaton is a little bit on the lower end of character focus for me, and that's why I just naturally didn't really give him as much spotlight. But I did kind of try to bring still stuff in with him, with Napstablu kind of wondering about them and having his diaries, and Mad Mew Mew like looking for him as well. Just, yeah, you know, sprinkling it in wherever I could, but I could have emphasized on that much more. That is definitely my biggest regret.
One memory out of all the amalgamates.
I don't know. They're cute, right? To be honest, when I first drew the amalgamate talking with Sans in the very first Sans note, I didn't actually think of what specific amalgamate it'd be. I thought it would be like some random one, but a lot of people saw Memory Head in it, and I thought, you know what, let's let the people speak and just leave it at Memory Head. I'm also kind of glad that I went with Memory Head, because I think it made Out of Character specifically a much more interesting comic as a result, because Memory Head isn't like the other amalgamates. They're not really made out of any specific monster as far as we're aware. There's also like this little tail that goes around. It's like really slimy and goopy, and it can't really talk in a normal way. But there's like also something melancholic about this creature existing, and I felt like, you know what? That's pet material. I want this as a pet. I want this to be relevant here. Come on. Does Sans's trans identity ever affect anything? I've looked through the dog and I found this little snippet of info. Does this mean in a fan game there could be a random chance of period? I mean, if you want to implement that, that is completely fine by me. The whole thing with him being trans is kind of important to his identity in a strange way, but I also don't think it's like massively important. I still think it's important to acknowledge as like a part of representation, but like it doesn't have to affect anything. Sometimes people are just trans, right? Sometimes people just are. There doesn't always have to be like an overarching story about that, right? Some of the art shown Susie and Noelle in the shelter. Does this mean everybody from the Deltaverse exists? Wait, is Des alive? Yes, the Delta cast does exist in the Dr. Megalo universe. It was mostly a cute cameo, but I also like the idea that they're also involved in it, because I like personally the idea of Sans being from Deltarune originally, so I do think that these connections are kind of important as well. My favorite thing is to think that Carol is also in the shelter, and she gives like the most evil eye towards Toriel for leaving the kingdom. Also, yes, Des is in fact alive. She is protecting Noelle all the time. She sometimes even helps in the kitchen, and is a delight to be with for all the children. Are you ever planning to make an actual fan game, or are you sticking to comics? I am an artist mostly. I have no gaming skills in that kind of regard. If someone wants to make it, that's cool. I can't. I could probably work with people to actually make a fan game, but to be honest, this is like a huge undertaking for what I have in my mind, and I feel like it will never be the kind that I would want if I was like the director for it. So honestly, I prefer to leave it to other people who have their own personal standards, and that sounds so bad. Just do whatever you want, okay? It's not coming from me. How did you come up with the Muffet and Papyrus pairing? They're giving me Halloween vibes. That's actually such a good way to illustrate the vibe of them. I honestly didn't think about it too much. Literally the only starting point I had in my mind was, okay, but how funny would it be for Muffet trying to teach Papyrus how to cook? Like, that was literally the basis, and for some reason it just kind of worked. I don't know what it is about it. It's just cute, right? This is also one of those things I kind of wish I had brewed a little bit more over. It's adorable, man. Will Burger Pants ever get a babe?
No.
Is there any indicator when Frisk or the player are in control? Okay, so here's the confirmation about the influence of the player in the game and all of Frisk. Is the puzzle culture still alive in the underground? Well, they're not really in the underground, but I'm assuming in the monster community that they've built, they probably still use puzzles for like kids and stuff. Although it would be very funny if in order to actually speak to Toriel or Asgore in the castle, they have to go like for a bajillion puzzles just to talk about tax declarations, you know? Does Papyrus have all the same powers as Sans? He's able to teleport and dodge now. I just haven't seen Gaster Blasters yet, so I ain't sure. There actually is the smallest panel of Papyrus using a Gaster Blaster. So yes, he has pretty much all the powers. He's just, you know, he has just higher stats. He uses his bone weapons a little differently than Sans. He's a little bit more chaotic with it. But yeah, they technically have all the same powers. To me, it just makes more sense that Papyrus just has kind of all these sets as well, and that Sans kind of has them, but in a more weaker sense, but he just uses them in a more interesting way. It would be kind of fun if Papyrus had something a bit over Sans, but I wouldn't really be able to tell you what exactly it is, other than that he's just significantly stronger in every way. Will Undyne never forgive the human? That's a stupid question. This is Undyne we're talking about, of course not. Yeah, that's pretty much the summary of it. Undyne would probably let up on the animosity towards Frisk over time a little bit, because, you know, she's living her own life, so there's no point in hanging on to that too much. But, you know, I don't think you should need to forgive everyone, right? You need to have your own standards sometimes, and I think Undyne is completely in her right to not forgive Frisk, no matter how much time has passed. But over the years, she does kind of grunt just a tiny bit less whenever they're mentioned. What would Dr. Megalo's soul trait be? If it's not determination, then then I did something wrong, man. Grillbees has a flamethrower? I think the single funniest thing about the one animation I posted about the 2 meme is the amount of people who just were so happy and also so shocked about Grillbees having a flamethrower. I can't exactly tell you what the actual idea was. I just thought it was cool. I don't know. Something about an elegant, like, bartender or handling, like, a massive minigun is just... Something about it is just so satisfying, man. What are the River Person and Grillbee's dynamic during and after the Dr. Megalo fiasco? They're just kind of chill. I think they're just the kind of people that kind of know each other. They're not exactly close friends, but they're also like they probably use each other's services quite frequently. That sounded very wrong. Afterwards, Grillbee is just kind of working at the bar and stuff, you know, just like he did before. And I think the River Person is just going through the tiny ass river that goes through the monster community as well, because, you know, what else are they supposed to do? Use a bus? How many times Frisk tried to burn something? A lot. What happens to those 2 guards in Hotland?
Use your imagination.
Okay, but if you're talking about during Dr. Megalo, they're just part of the search party in some places. At some point they would probably be enemies that you have to fight in some way, but they would be like mini bosses. They wouldn't be like big end area bosses like they would be in Snowden and Waterfall, where it's like with the amalgamates. I think they would just be extra obstacles, more or less. What would the characters of the AU do if they were put in Deltarune, specifically Alphys and Sans? Well, Alphys would probably be really interested in Dark Worlds, because I think it would actually approach her dream of being able to create a world that is just hers. Like the whole thing with Dr. Megalo is that she's sort of trying to destroy the world and just creating for something from the ground up a little bit for herself. So having a Dark Fountain be exactly that almost, I think she would really, really be appealed with that idea. Like first she would intentionally cause the roaring and then want to make a Dark Fountain all for herself. That is just fantasy, where she is the one in control. Sans, on the other hand, he's just gonna be quiet and just sit down a little bit, and if you ask him, it's mostly just sweat on his eyes and nothing else. Just don't worry about it. Does Sans fall in love with someone eventually on the surface? Canonically, no. Private drawings? Will you be doing more Dr. Megalo Papyrus stuff? Just anything about him planned? I know there's probably already content you're finished doing with him, but look, as much as I love Papyrus, this is just the one AU where I'm not quite sure what else you can do with him. He already is he's already contributing quite a bit to being like the biggest motivator for Sans and his actions and his, you know, him actually doing stuff. I feel like Papyrus in particular, the only thing that I could like come up with is like a very slice of life kind of thing with Muffet, but I'm also not particularly too interested in doing that. There is, however, a plan to involve him a little bit in a mini project I have, but he wouldn't be the center stage of it. It would mostly be something towards the end.
Oh, my bad. If you see the Papyro one below, that's mine. I forgot to queue. I was too excited.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
Where the fuck was Papyrus and Deltarune, Toby?
What are some songs you listen to or find suit your characters on the cast? Very curious about Sans and Alpha's Rolling Girl, got me curious about others, but any characters that come to mind. I adore seeing creative types music to go to, especially for characterization. Look, I don't want to make it sound like I'm not a music person, because I actually do like music, but it's actually really difficult for me to find songs that are like specific for characters, because, you know, I admire people who like take one sentence of a song and basically base the entire thing on them, and then the rest of the song has literally nothing to do with it. It's really difficult for me to find songs that are remotely close to that, but sometimes I will listen to like things from what's it called, Set It Off once in a while, where they have like certain songs that are like really appropriate for alphas and stuff. Wolf in Sheep's Clothing is probably very good for Frisk and stuff. I feel like these have been really done really well. Has anyone else seen that one shirt where where that is referenced with Sans on the shirt? That was great. I thought that was a shit post. I think the closest song that related was really Rolling Girl, which is why I used it. So I hope that answers it somewhat. I want to answer this question, but not in character questions. I think Sans' favorite food is just whatever fast food you can give him. I don't think he has any specific thing that he likes a lot. Meanwhile, for Alphys, just I think she got so addicted to like the noodles that she's been eating the entire resets that at this point she's just not able to eat anything else. What gave you inspiration for this Sans crash out scene on Out of Character? What is something that you just thought up in a moment, or did you plan out a scene like that when deciding to make Dr. Megalo? Oh, that was not planned out at all. It was, what I think some people overestimate how much I knew what I wanted to do with the first comic. When I did the very first comic, it was literally just concept of an AU that I just had in my mind, and it was just, I wasn't really gonna do anything. Like in the very first comic, I wrote it in the comments where, well, in the replies, where I didn't actually want to do anything with it, and then just give it like to the community to do whatever the hell they want with it. And it was only afterwards where I thought like, okay, maybe we can like brainstorm some stuff so people have a bit more material, right? And all of these notes that you see, that's me brainstorming. That was basically me going with things on the go somewhat. Which is why in the Dr. Megalo doc, you'll notice some things are not exactly contradicting, but a tiny bit retconned here and there. Just change it a tiny bit just to make more a bit sense here and there. And yeah, that's because I didn't really have anything planned. For the Sans crash out, I was mostly thinking about Sans as a character and what I needed him to be in order to actually become the fanon version in a way. Like, I think I explained it in like a Happy's video, but the basic gist of it was that I wanted there to be a transition between canon Sans and fanon one, and for that to happen, first there needs to be a complete destruction of his canon self, and to just kind of think about, okay, what is something that he might be insecure about? What it would be the reason why he is the way he is, and, you know, play with my own interpretations and stuff. That kind of thing. That's the best way I can really put it. How exactly do those glass shards stay in Alphys' face between resets? Like, I understand why her eye is still missing and the other scars that was explained, but how are the physical shards of glass affected? I mean, if you want a proper answer, I could give you the answer that these shards are basically just kind of dug into her skin a bit, and that's why during the resets, not only does her body remember the genocides, just remember her stats like the LV, but they also remember her DNA structure in a way, and in that the shards become like almost part of her because of it. If you want my actual answer, however, it just looks cool, man. You know, just being a cool design choice. Like, I don't know what else to tell you, man. When you first began making this, was it just a sudden spark of inspiration, or was it slow and gradual? I mean, if you were there last year where I was just doing these notes, you could definitely see, like, every day I was, like, trying to, like, shit out as much brainstorming material for it as possible. At first there were, like, the sans note, and then there was, like, the game mechanic note. And then I was, like, thinking about what could the story be, and the basics of it, and it was, like, a very gradual, like, brainstorming session, basically. All 3 weeks, by the way! Was Melody a quick random OC you just placed in? Yes. Sometimes you just do shit, okay? Do you think there are characters you could have used differently, like Ascorsa in his truck? You guys are so brain rotted. If Megalo had succeeded in their plan, what would they do? Generally, if she had genuinely succeeded, all of it would have felt extremely hollow, trying to recreate her like recreating her universe as best as she could in her image, and everything would feel fake, and there would be a lot of isolation and loneliness, and realizing that maybe this was just not worth it, and eventually just becoming part of the universe in one shape or the other. Anyway, what inspired you to give Dr. Megalo Sans his trademark slutty eyes? I mean, that's just how I draw Sans, honestly, but to be honest, I kinda have not been drawing his eyes that way in a while, actually. Like, his eyes are still slinted, but you can definitely tell it's a little less, salacious in a way, you could say. Yeah, what I've been doing recently is just draw his open eyes properly, and then just erase the top of it, and I feel like it kind of fits him a little bit more, and only when he's like genuinely being drawn in a, you know, a certain way, then I'll do the slutty eyes. But most of the time I actually try to make him seem a little bit less like that these days. It is just a bit unfortunate that the moment you have like slanted eyes, people immediately see it as something provocative, when sometimes it's just not meant to be. To be honest, the eyes was more because of an OC, because she's like similar to Sans in some way. And the moment that people started calling it slutty, it was like, okay, maybe maybe I need to retire this just a tiny bit. It was funny while it lasted, but no. If you were playing Dr. Megalo as a fan game, what route would you go? So the intended way, well, intended very heavy quotation marks, how you're supposed to play is to go with team up with Sans and trying to be as pacifistic as possible about it. Then you're supposed to reset to like find some other pathway, some other clues in the solo run, and then go back into the Sans team up route, which would then get you into the finale routes, which would first then be the betrayal route, and then reset again, and then do the finale route. That would be like the speedrunner way of it, you know. Okay, what would I actually go for? I would probably just play the good route first, and like the Sans team up, and then just never play again because I'm not a gamer. Also, the way that Dr. Megalo is structured is to be a very hard game, and I don't know if I could even go past Snowden, if I'm gonna be honest. What inspired Sans transition? You mean what inspired Sans to transition, or what inspired me to make him trans? I'm not sure what the question is exactly asking. Now, what inspired Sans to transition? Probably the fact that he realized that he's trans. Probably. As for why I decided to make him trans, because I found the period jokes so funny, and something about there being a slight connection between me and Sans just made my heart go a little lighter, so you know what, it just felt right. Who was your favorite character to write? Which is what I'm assuming the question means. Well, I feel like that answer is pretty fucking obvious now. Well, what is Undyne stronger in this time? I'm assuming you ask why, and to be honest, she isn't that much stronger, but she is a lot more strong-willed because, you know, it's becoming personal, right? Because it's Alphys. That's why she's a lot stronger. In terms of how the characters change in stats, they don't really change that much. The biggest change really is in Alphys' attack patterns and power, then there's Sans' extra attacks, and just added magic stamina so he doesn't tire out as much. Papyrus is probably most likely the same. Meanwhile, Undyne, I would say she's the same, but because it's a lot more personal, her stats would be maybe a little increased by just a little bit. You do not want to fight Undyne in this. You just do not. What made you decide to do Metaton like that? I am sorry. I had to think about what characters to focus on. I am just one person. I cannot juggle everything. I am sorry. I already said I regret not focusing on him. I am so sorry. Would Sans have had a different punishment for Frisk if they did it hitless? This also means Sans did or anyone take damage either. You mean if Frisk had a no-hit run on all the resets? Or do you mean in Dr. Megalo specifically? If it was hitless in all of Dr. Megalo, I think Alphys would have a much earlier crash out, like having all these traps set up and seeing how this kid is just dodging everything. I think I would just fucking burn everything at this point. In UAU, is Frisk the strongest? Yes. But here's the problem with Frisk, right? Frisk is, if you look at all the stats, if you look at all the things, if you look at the whole document the Frisk fans give you, Frisk is completely busted, okay? If player input was not a question, was not a problem in this whole thing, Frisk would be incredibly... they're a god in this world. They're canonically basically a god in this universe. However, Dr. Megalo is specifically written in the perspective of a fan game, like a hypothetical fan game. And the world is supposed to be disorienting, it's supposed to be difficult, it's supposed to be much harder than the original Undertale. Therefore, Frisk, because of that perspective, will come off as a little weaker because they're at our mercy in a way. A little bit. Like, if that perspective didn't exist, then I think Frisk would be had a lot easier time with it. But I would also think that because Alphys just broke the rules so badly, that they would have problems, that reflects back on Alphys completely being on a new level of it. So Frisk is still stronger in the sense that they still hold the most determination to be able to come back to life and all that. But in terms of strength and all that, they are a bit nerfed for the purposes of this hypothetical fan game, right? So in theory, they're still the same Frisk, but they are at our mercy, which is why they will come off as a bit nerfed, right? So I know that some people really want Frisk to be like super strong and leave the 2016 depiction completely behind, but this is just a bit of a weird circumstance that I just don't think it applies quite well. So the answer is yesn't. I don't know, I've been trying to answer this question for like the past 10 minutes to properly phrase myself, right? This is the best you're gonna get. What was the experiment that lowered Sans' stats? I didn't really have too much of an idea. I just thought it would be interesting if they like worked on a machine that like manipulated your soul in some way to maybe do something with the barrier, and that Sans just happened to be like the guinea pig for it, and things did not end up well for him because of it. I really hope there isn't a canon reason in Deltarune to explain why he has these stats. Deltarune is already throwing a wrench in a lot of these things, if I'm gonna be honest. Did Frisk ever help Sans and Alphys when they had cramps that one time? Frisk has a pack of painkillers for Sans specifically. For Alphys, however, I think it would be more, I think Alphys would just do it for herself during the Dr. Megalo timeline, and during the Exile, it would obviously be Undyne and Alphys together, just keeping track of each other's periods, like... Does grown-up Frisk still engage in comic misfit? Of course. Can Paps swear? Yes, but very, very rarely, and mostly in the most posh way possible. Does Frisk ever try to learn magic? If so, Frisk does with Gas Blasters? I had an idea for that for another year actually, but no, I think they themselves wouldn't want to try to do magic, and even if they did, I think Sans and Papyrus would just refuse to teach them because they are already able to cause mayhem as is. Mixing in magic into this, it's just not a good idea. What if Dr. Megalo Alphys met her canon self? Her canon self? Is there a universe where everyone is just a canon? How does Dr. Megalo Sans react to Dust Sans? I've answered this in a different ask before, but I think Sans in general would have a bit of sympathy because of Alphys, but he would just, you know, he'd just slowly walk away. just not today. What if Kara suddenly came back to life? I don't think Kara wants to come back to life, I'm gonna be real with you. Like, if they came back to life, I don't think they'd be around for long. The sand's cleaned with toothpaste. I sure hope so. If you could completely retcon something, would you? No. I mean, I did small retcons here and there when doing the Dr. Megalo, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm pretty sure I ironed out everything that I wanted to. There are some things I wish I had included instead, but completely retcon? No, I think I'm fine with that. Timeline where Frisk stays with Undyne and Al. That was actually the original idea. Like, okay, not with Undyne, but the original idea while I was doing the brainstorming session was actually for Frisk to stay with Al because, you know, they both have a similar journey that they have to make and kind of trying to get together. But at some point I thought, I don't want Al to be just with Frisk. I think Al deserves to be with Undyne, I think Undyne would want to be with Al. I think it would make Undyne look worse a little bit if she just forgave Frisk just for the sake of them being with the two. I think it's okay to acknowledge that Undyne is in the right to not like Frisk and not forgive them. So I feel like it's better if Frisk is not with them, if that makes sense. Okay, so this is not a question, but I just want to appreciate these two drawings. These are really cute. I like that. I really like the fact that people still doodle into them. Sometimes I don't know if I actually have left a painting option on in the straw page, but I always love seeing that. Although I am noticing that Alphys is wearing her finale glasses here, so what's going on here? Since Frisk is homeschooled, do they have any friends at all, or are they friendless? I don't think that would be healthy for a kid to have no socialization with their peers given the trauma they have from the events from Dr. Megalo. So, here's the thing, it's not that they don't try to socialize, especially with Sans and Papyrus, but there have been incidents where they are not very trusting towards other humans as well, so it's like, it's a very slow process. Like, they eventually do go out a bit more and try to be a bit more in places where it's a bit more populated, and eventually having some friends here and there and trying to stay in places with the van. But they're also, like, very cautious, and, you know, especially with Frisk, who's, like, clearly doesn't like the surface, things develop very slowly. I'm not gonna say that Sans and Papyrus are necessarily very great at integrating them into society. I think it's important to remember that, you know, they are people, well, monsters. They're just trying their best, and sometimes they're not always doing the right decisions, and but they do get the most socialization back when they're in college, and it does get a lot more healthy after that. What's your opinion on people that call Dr. Megalo a dust cell take despite not being one at all? To be honest, I don't blame anybody for thinking that, because the way I labeled it was a bit shoddy, not gonna lie. I could have phrased it a bit better and just call it inspired by Dusttail. In the comics and the websites, I did change it into based on Dusttail, but not being, of course, exactly like Dusttail or something. So I don't blame anybody for mistaking it in that way. And the one thing I don't want is for people to compare it and call it better than Dusttail. That is the one thing I don't want. Like, I don't care how you label it, just don't compete them to each other. Like, if you prefer one over the other, that's one thing, but please do not put it in the context of thinking that one is objectively better than the other, because objectivity does not exist in that sense. I have 3 questions. First, how is the brothers, Flowey, MH, and the kid traveling since they got the truck after they ran away? 2, what is your opinion in black tea? And what is Gaster's opinion on Alpha's past plans? Have a good day. I'm gonna ignore the Gaster question, but I will answer the other 2. The brothers, Flowey, the kid, and MH are all good. Flowey is sometimes a little pissy because he's not allowed to go anywhere without supervision and someone holding his pot, but, you know, what can you do? They're mostly doing okay. And MH is just a nice pet in the family. Now, what is my opinion on black tea? So this is not a Dr. Megalo question, but I like black tea. I do like it. It depends on the kind, but I do like it. I do drink more green tea these days, though. So, it's like black tea light to me. This is the one personal question we're gonna get. Will Frisk's backstory ever get revealed, or is it left up to interpretation in your use? Same question with Kara. How does Kara feel about Frisk? How does Kara feel about Sans? Kara seems to be morally gray in your use. I'm curious about their motivations, so what are they? I have my own interpretations, but I'm curious about yours. It's really funny that the question started with Frisk, but you are clearly more interested in Kara. In terms of our Kara, you know, their morality is a little messed up. The way that I look at it is that their soul and Frisk's soul are like intertwined, so whenever Frisk does go for like levels and stuff, they themselves get also influenced by it in some way, and it also supports their idea of like completionism as well, so they don't question it as much. It's only really when they try to go for something good in the finale where they start to feel really pissy about the betrayal run, particularly, where it's like, okay, you are just wasting my time. This is getting fucking ridiculous. So they're like in a definitely morally gray kind of area. They don't really have a particular feelings towards Sans himself, and Kara just kind of doesn't feel that much remorse for Frisk, but you know, there's still a tiniest bit of a soft spot because of the journey that they went through. As for Frisk's backstory, I intentionally left it up to air. Like, I have some ideas for the backstory. It's not like I don't. But I also feel like it's important to leave Frisk as this character who intentionally doesn't reveal anything about themselves, and trying to look at their situation for what it is. Like, you can have sympathy for them, you can have some opinion of them, but it doesn't excuse anything. And I feel like trying to show what their backstory is could maybe pendle towards trying to excuse it, and that's not really the point. So I think it's important to, you know, have sympathy for them, but still have this level of distance, like, okay, this kid has clearly been hurt, but there's still some responsibility on them. So I personally would leave it up in the air, even though I do have some ideas for it, if that makes any sense. Was Sans being trans a reference to the neurons Sans bottom surgery shortcut? I've seen it, but no, actually, it was actually, I don't know who the artist was, but if you can find it, you can like put it in the comments, but it was this one artist who had like Sans and Alphys like exchanging clothes to each other because they were both like portrayed as trans. So Alphys would be the trans girl, the Sans would be the trans guy. I don't remember exactly what the context for this one was, but they were just exchanging clothes, and something about that felt so warm in my heart. But it's mostly because of my period projection onto him. Would you plan on giving each of the boss monsters and non-boss monsters their own section in the story to not only develop their fanning characters in your mind, but also help them grow a connection with Frisk, so when they do eventually regain their memories in the end, they all would, you know, try to murder Frisk with close to no remorse? Undyne, Asgore, Metaton, maybe. So towards the end of the finale run, they do kind of all look at all the footage of Frisk, you know, doing their genocide, so they remember you are genocides. I mean, towards the finale run, Frisk and Undyne do have a bit of like a Scooby-Doo kind of section at the lab, and that is pretty important to establish Undyne as not completely heartless, right? And that she still hates their guts, but to a certain degree they start to she also does see that they are trying to help, right? She's still fucking mad about it, but there's a part of her that like gets like, okay, I'm not going anywhere if I'm just going to be angry at them 24/7. I need to have like a limit to it, right? Asgore, I think I said it in the Dr. Megalo doc, but he does feel a certain sense of betrayal, and he doesn't quite know what to feel about it. So he doesn't really want to talk to them too much, but it's not in like a malicious way like it is with Undyne. It's more like a that kind of way, right? And then Metaton, I think Metaton in general would be in a similar position to Undyne, where he preferred not to have anything to do with Frisk. So I feel like in terms of like giving them each a section, I mean, Undyne already has a section technically. Asgore would be more of a subplot in finale, and I don't really want to do that. And Metaton, again, I wish I had put more stuff in it, but I feel like how he feels towards Frisk is kind of irrelevant. as it's more relevant as to how he feels about Alphys, to be honest. Who do you think grows the most in your AU? Sans and Frisk. I mean, Alphys does kind of grow, but she also does a bit of a reverse growing first before doing the back to normal growing, if that makes any sense. In terms of like a linear growth, it's definitely more on Sans and sort of on Frisk as well, depending on how you play it, right? Will we see a fight scene, mainly between Sans and Alphys, or maybe Frisk and Sans? I mean, Frisk and Sans kind of exists in the notes, but it's also like very minimal. Sans and Alphys, I do want to make a proper fight animatic of it. Not animation, that shit's gonna take forever. I do want to make an animatic, but it's just been difficult to like find the time for it, and also choreographing fights. That is something that I'm just not familiar, that I haven't really tried before. And I feel like I need to make sure that I know first what I'm doing. So I need to first make it like a clear, very, very light storyboard of it first before I can really get into like something a bit more extreme. But I do plan on making one eventually. And I really, really, really hope this answer doesn't age like fucking milk. 1. Could we expect another chapter in the saga? I'm going to ignore everything else because all of it is related to AUs and Gaster in one package, actually. That's impressive. I actually did have a sort of side story quintilogy in mind. It was supposed to be a trilogy, the chapter thing, but I think it's ending up to have more 5 chapters in total, so it's a ton of stuff. That would be about Toriel and Sans, and not in a Soriel way. I know you're looking at my YouTube channel right now. It's not in a Soriel way, I swear. But I had like something planned out for, because I wanted to flesh out Toriel a little bit, because she's like at the shelter the entire time, and I thought that she does need a bit more. It does need some characterization, and I thought it would be nice to have like a little side story going on. But I have halted that a little bit because of the whole Chapter 4 ending giving a bit of controversy, so I didn't want to work on it until I knew that things have died down, and things have died down now. But I'm mainly gonna look into things that I want to self-indulge in, but in terms of like actual like chapters, I do want to have like a mini music video maybe with Metaton and Alphys and this side story. But after that, I think the only focus would be then to just make the Sans versus Alphys fight, and then that's it, I think. Oh, one more. Is Sans happier now that the threat of resets are gone for the moment? Yes, but I really don't like how you said for the moment. What do you mean, sir? Question 1. Is Sailor Doom just a robot, or do they also have an amalgamate fused with it? And if so, who is it? Question 2. What would Papyrus' reaction be if he knew about the letter? Question 3. Would you accept an egg from Gaster if he offered one to you? Okay, 1. Sailor Doom does have amalgamates with it, but it's not infused with any specific one. There's the substance of the DT, and then there's the amalgamates, and sometimes the DT itself, like the Omni DT, gets infused with the robots independently of the amalgamates, but some of their material still gets infused with them, so there's not an amalgamate exactly on them, like a specific one, but it does have the DNA of some of it, right? If that makes any sense. In terms of how Papyrus would react to his own letter, like he would glaze himself for how well it's written, but also be really, really, really emotional about how strongly that affected Sans, and probably wished he had said something sooner. And for the third question, yes, I would accept an egg from Gaster. I'm sure he does it really well. I mean, I love scrambled eggs. If he gives me scrambled eggs, I'll eat it. An innocent question. What's the first place Sans and Pappy went after getting the RV? Somewhere in a hill, just in a forest, just to get out at some point at night and just look at the stars. I wanted to come up with a funny answer, but I think this is realistically the first thing they would do. They would just be stargazing. Alright, just one more. Is Sans Extorial a thing in this AU? Okay, so here's the thing. When I first streamed the first Undertale Let's Play on YouTube, there was a sentence I said where I said that I see them more as friends, but I do have still a soft spot for Soriel. And that wasn't exactly a lie, but at the time I said that, I was still figuring out what I actually believed for myself and what was fandom influenced. You get what I mean, right? Like when you see fandoms do this stuff and you're like thinking like, is this something I really think of, or is this just the fandom's influence on me? And I've come to the conclusion at some point where it's like, somewhere independently that I didn't really say out loud, it was like, you know what, actually, no, I do personally see the potential in it, and in the other videos you have seen that I do openly ship it now, right? And in my social media, I mean, I don't show it too often, but you know, I've shared one or two like personal drawings, so you know, I see the potential in it. And in my little self-indulgent drawings, I do like to experiment with that. That being said, there are two reasons why I wouldn't want to make it a thing, like, canonically. The first thing is that the main focus of this AU, like in terms of dynamics, is Sans and Alphas, right? Their friendship is the most important in this entire AU, with the growing relationship also between the parental relationship between Sans and Frisk, right? Those are the most important dynamics in the entire AU, with like small subplots like Sans and Papyrus having growing as brothers again, Frisk having a connection with Papyrus, Frisk having a connection in parallel with Alphas having the thing with Undyne that is clearly very important emotionally. Like, there's already a lot of dynamics in them. Throwing in a romantic relationship between Sans and Toriel, like, in my self-indulgence drawings, I love doing that. However, in the side story I'm already planning, there's already a lot of focus on them as, like, friends and the promise thing, if I were to spoil something already. Turning it into something romantic, I think would sort of undermine and also slightly take away from the main plot a little bit. So I wouldn't want it to be canon for that reason. But if I were to give you the second and the probably actual reason why I wouldn't want to make it canon, is because people can't fucking shut the fuck up about ships. If there is one thing I am more afraid of than the power scaling sun, it's the shipping daughter, or rather the anti-shipping daughter in this case. Would that be a non-shipping but non-binary? Is that a thing? Look, people are always going to be vocal about things that they don't like, right? About haters and stuff. And I don't want to make it sound like that would be like the only motivator for me to like do things if people just didn't say anything. But I feel like as long as people cannot just be civil about a fan interpretation, I just would rather it not have that be the deterrent for anybody getting into this AU, right? I'd rather not have like a whole ass discussion about why this works, why this doesn't, just because I want to have some like fluffy stuff in my own stuff, you know? Again, to summarize, it also would take away a little bit from the main focus of the story, but I also feel like people just cannot unfocus on ships like that, and I would rather just talk about other things, you know? I would rather do anything else than just keep on seeing people being just fucking babies about it, okay? So, canonically, no. Spiritually, yes, I guess. If your Sora header doesn't influence anything, there's nothing in the canon. If you do ship Zoriel, you can read it as that. But I am not gonna touch it with a 10-foot pole with that whole discussion, like, nah. As time passes and Frisk moves on in adulthood now that there are no threats of Memory Head and Flowey, mainly MH, will they try to live their own life and move out of the van? Maybe MH would try and find their two other siblings and Flowey will make peace with his new life. So MH, maybe I didn't make it very clear. I think the MH is voluntarily not being with their two other siblings as such. They want to be with Sans. The Memory Head is very attached to Sans for one reason or another. And, okay, I should probably give a reason. In my head, Memory Head and Sans, in one of the timelines when Flowey was still in control of the resets, actually got really close. Actually got really close in the lab, and he was actually a little bit more helpful with the amalgamates in that timeline. And therefore, Memory Head would be a lot more happy being with Sans and just hanging around with the Bone Brothers and the Femurs, as I call it. Not that I don't miss their two other siblings, but I also am not quite sure what their relationship exactly is between the goop things, and so I think Maybe like once in a while Sans goes with them to the monster community, and then they like meet up once in a while to have like a little goop session, whatever that looks like. But they mostly just want to stay with Sans and Papyrus as well. Flowey would probably just stay with Papyrus as well. There was an idea somewhere where maybe he'd stay with Asgore and Toriel and maybe be honest about who he is, but at the same time I think he would rather just reluctantly but also secretly really want to stay with Papyrus, just Papyrus, because they have a nice friendship, right? As for Frisk, Frisk would want to live their own life at some point and move out the van, just so they wouldn't be too much of a burden, but they obviously still meet up once in a while and having nice dinner parties and all that. Now, what happened to Mad Dummy? They still turn into Mad Mew Mew? Yes, they do still turn into Mad Mew Mew. In fact, in the entire Dr. Megalo EU, Mad Dummy is always in her Mad Mew Mew fit, because she slays with that. Okay, so this is an in-character question, which I feel really bad about, but I do want to answer some of the questions. I like to think that Sans does collect like some souvenirs from place to place that are like a little star related. Like he has like all these maps of like constellations in his bedroom. In his like little, bedroom, in his little section in the van. And Alphys obviously would be like collecting still these anime figurines as they go from state to state and all that. What are Susie, Noelle, and Birdley doing on the surface? Is Frisk friends with them? And what is Chris and Rossi doing? I like to think that during the van trip that they have, that the few times where they are interacting with them, with others on the surface, I think that they would actually encounter Chris here and there. They're Birdley, Noelle, Susie, and Ralsei less so because they would be in the monster communities and, you know, they're exiled from that, so they can't really do that much. But maybe once, I could imagine that maybe Susie at some point just leaves the monster community and then doesn't really care too much about what everything else is going around. And without really thinking about the exile, without thinking about anything, just wants to hang out with Frisk maybe once in a while. And Frisk will always remember that one weird dino girl that for some reason didn't realize that that they were supposed to not actually be in contact with any monsters and just have this memory of this girl, or this really rough girl that just didn't care about anything and just wanted to be with them, and it makes me emotional now that I'm saying it out loud. It makes me so sad. What inspired the designs of each character in the comic? Each character, okay. So again, for Alphys, I have a whole like page on it. Sans is intentionally very minute in terms of character design. Like sure, could I have given him a more of a yellow design because of this whole justice thing? Yes, but I feel like Alphys is still yellow. I feel like that would be a bit weird looking if Sans was just all yellow as well. Blue is still his color, right? I feel like it's just his trademark color, so I wouldn't want to change that too much. But the whole reason why Sans doesn't really have too much of a change in his costume is mostly because he is still himself. He's growing, but he's still himself, and so therefore I wouldn't want to change too much about his design, and literally the only thing that is different is him having a very, very visible sign of him being aware of his past and all that. As for the other characters, I mean, the only characters that really have a new design really is Papyrus with his like chef's hat and all that. The first times I drew the chef's hat, I completely missed the opportunity to design it after a bone shape, so that was something I had to. You know what? That's actually something that I had to that I wanted to retcon. I want to retcon the chef's hat looking having like these 3 puffs and instead having 2 puffs, so it looks more like a bone. That's the thing I want there to be on the design. And everyone else is pretty much the same, with just the exception of like the amulet. Although, if you're asking me how I decided to draw them, like generally, like how I decided to draw the Animatic characters in the style that I do, I don't know, man. The brain sometimes does things, and sometimes I don't have control over it. When the brain says something, I just go, yes, sir. Ignore me wearing my Sans jacket now. I am on my period, so of course I need the projecting to get a bit stronger here. Will there be something like this ever happening again? Because I love the story so much. You mean another story of you? Or you saying another Dr. Megalo? Because I don't think the characters would appreciate a round 2, personally. How many outdogs can we put on Doc's head without her killing us? You, 0. Sans, 4. Did the story already end? If not, for how long will it be going for? Officially, it's kinda ended already a year ago, but for your Fantasyland and in mine, it can go on for as long as you want to, my child. Did Sans ever get the chance to talk to Papyrus about the letter from him? If so, what was the conversation like? They never have this conversation, but I think both of them intrinsically know that they somehow have influenced each other in some shape or form, so they don't need to talk about it. This is just a little secret between brothers, you know? Can Dr. Megalo beat Goku? Yes. Purely out of curiosity, is Sans actually canonically trans in this AU, or is that like an ongoing separate non-canon joke? For the Undertale, Sans is obviously a joke, but for the canon of the Dr. Megalo universe, I don't know, it just kind of started to fit a little bit with his identity crisis a little bit, so I thought, you know what, why not? So it is canon. What do you think would have happened if A, Flowey got the human souls and went god hyper deaf, or B, Frisk was on a perma-Jenna run? Would either of those affect the story in any ways, you think, or change the ending entirely? So, perma-Jenna run, you mean like if Alphys didn't do her whole thing? Because that would just go on infinitely, I think, at this point. If you mean like going Jenna, like if Frisk did in fact go through with their betrayal run and go back to the original Undertale timeline, I think it would at some point just revert back to the Dr. Megalo timeline eventually. Yeah, I don't know if it would like happen sooner or later than originally, but it would, I don't know, this question makes me uncomfortable because it just makes me think about the infinity of torment, and I don't like that. In terms of Flowey, I think Flowey would become the new primary threat, I think, afterwards. Although, I think it could also be interesting if it was like a battle between Alphys and Flowey again at some point, so it's like a rivalry a bit, because Flowey is definitely still salty about Alphys just diffing him at the end of the original Dr. Megalo comic. I think he'd have a lot of fun just paying that back. Does Papyrus still own his car, or did he have to give it up for the van? He did have to kind of give it up for the van, because vans are expensive. I would say that he would probably exchange the van for a car once Frisk decides to move out, because at some point they probably would want to get into a proper house or something, and the whole van thing was more for them to like explore, you know, the country together and just having a journey together. So at some point they would probably find a proper house eventually. But that wouldn't happen until like a few years after Frisk actually gets an actual job and is like actually living by themselves completely independently now. In the end, Sans and Paps are guardians, and we know Sans teaches science, but what types of things would Paps be teaching? What kind of homeschool shenanigans would the three get into? So Sans would mostly do the science things, and then whenever there's like something he's not too sure of, he'll like ask Toriel for some advice over the phone, or like meeting her at the community, and then just getting some tips so he can like properly teach it here and there. Sometimes Alphys will chime in as well if necessary, but most of the time it's mostly Sans doing the homeschooling. Meanwhile, Papyrus is obviously going to be the gym teacher in all of this in the most Papyrus way you can imagine. Why did Alphys keep the glass on her forehead? Does it hurt? Aura. It's mostly aura. Dumb question, but why do amalgamates know about genocides, meanwhile Flowey can't? Like, I get the amalgamates have determination stuff, but wouldn't they be on the same boat due to True Reset affecting Flowey too? Who is mostly just them for real is an honorary amalgam to me, at least. I mean, okay, honorary amalgam Flowey actually is a really interesting concept. Please work with that. That's actually a really cool idea. However, the way that I look at it personally is that I tried to explain it in the doc, but maybe it got a little bit confusing at some point. The Omni DT isn't just determination of the souls, it is also the soul determination from the actual monsters. So Omni DT isn't just human DT, but also monster DT, and I think this combination of it makes them a little, just a tiniest bit more resistant to resets, so that they would actually see. Because to me, Flowey is able to basically be able to reset and reload and all that because he's still abiding by the rules of what determination is supposed to be doing. Meanwhile, Omni-DT is a combination of monster and human soul determination, which is breaking the code in some way. Like, they're not supposed to be this way. They're not supposed to be able to see certain things. They're not supposed to, like, you know, turn into save points or into chat boxes and stuff. That is something beyond what they are supposed to be able to do. So in my head, amalgams are kind of breaking the code by their mere existence in a way. So that's the main explanation. But police work with honorary Flowey amalgam. That is such a cool... I don't know what it is about that sentence. That is actually such a cool thought. Okay, this is like a massive question, which again is in-character question, which again, sorry for not making it clear that it's not that. But to go over some of the things that you're saying, like again, my favorite scene is definitely the out-of-character thing. Like that is... I definitely still see this as my magnum opus in terms of writing. This has just been my favorite thing in general. It's just, to me, that is peak fiction of everything I've done. About the annoying dog, I mean, the annoying dog exists. I like to think that he's mostly one of the carrying around one of Sans' cameras that you need to catch if you're like going on a solo run, so that's something funny to think about. The implants can make one remember resets, yet an implant reset is so strong even the implants on Sans and Alphas can't remember it. Yes, the implant reset, the reason why it's so powerful is because it's in combination with Frisk's determination, which is established to be like fucking busted. So of course it would override the existing implants, you know. That's a no duh for me. Is Sans secretly crossbones?
I don't know what you're talking about. Get the fuck out.
What is your favorite part about making this AU, and any tips for people who are just starting to make AUs? I think people overthink it a little bit with AUs. You just gotta ask yourself if there's something you're curious about and whether or not it's like a completely new concept that is going into like completely AU or an alternate timeline kind of thing. It's about just ask yourself what if, and if there's something that interests you, then to try to go with that. As for how to go about it, you don't necessarily have to do it like I did, but definitely do make yourself like a tiny document with all the brainstorming you do. Personally, I like to draw things out and then also add text to it. That's how I did with the with all the story notes. So maybe do something like that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like the AU. It doesn't have to be like I did it, where the notes are the AU. And more so like a little cheat sheet, so that when you make a comic or like fanfic or whatever, that you have something to look back on to like check if everything's right, all right. You definitely want to have some notes, which is why Mirror War is taking forever to come back to, because the dumbass that I am, I have not written down a single thing. It's all in my head. So if you're wondering about why that's not going on, here's your answer. Yay! How did you get the big brain idea of the amalgamates being the way alphas learn about other timelines? I don't know, I feel like the amalgamates in general get more associated with Gaster in some way, for some reason. And I don't know, something about the idea of the amalgamates being a bit more plot relevant just felt kind of appealing to me. And you know, it's obviously the logic behind the amalgamates is complete bullshit, right? It's like it's completely made up. Nothing in the game indicates that they could do that. But there is some indication about the amalgamates having, like, you know, rule-breaking elements to them, and I thought, you know what, it's a fun headcanon, let's just roll with it, why not, it'd be funny. At some point after finale, and maybe on the surface, did Frisk ever mention how on some rare timelines they found a hallway with a door and waterfall where they found a strange man to disappear once they tried to interact with him? I feel like Sans would stare at them like, what do they know, meme. Okay, so, I wasn't gonna answer this because it's Gaster related, but I think it's important to point out that no one actually remembers Gaster in this universe. Like, both Alphas and Sans, like, they know they have worked with someone, but the memory of Gaster is completely distorted, where they don't remember his name, they don't really remember his face, they don't really remember, they just knew there was once this one guy that we worked with. But beyond that, they have, like, zero memory of him. I think if Frisk talked about it, he would get, like, a... you know, that kind of reaction. But other than that, I don't think he would. This is a lot of sun right now. Hold on.
Do you like seeing me in the dark? I'm a lot hotter in the dark, I think. Because you don't usually see my face that much.
Do they know about other timelines they use? Like, that's still on the swap. So, specifically about these they use? No, but they do know that alternate universes exist. Particularly Sans for reasons. Will you ever make post-reset content? Because I'd love to see them all alive on the service, please! I mean, there are some little notes, but to be honest, I think I'm done. Why did Frisk want to do genocide in the first place? Why would they turn their backs on them? So, Frisk in this AU, particularly, the way I like to look at it is that when they first get into the underground, they're like so enamored by everything. It's just so much wonder and everything, and in comparison to what they had on the surface, it's so much more precious. And they don't really want to go to the surface, but at the same time, they want to see everything. And a part of them also doesn't like the idea of sticking around with Toriel, because something about it just makes them think that eventually something's gonna go wrong anyway. So they decide to just move on anyway. And by the time they get to the surface with the entire family, they think they're ready. They think that they can finally have a family again, but then they think about all the things they missed down there and just think, just one more time. Just one more time. Let's see what I missed. And then go back, and then go back, and then go back, and then go back until at some point they run out of things to do, and so they think, okay, what else can I do to stay? What is something I haven't explored? And then they go again, and then they go again, and they go again, and then a monster dies. They go again, a monster dies, and another, and another, and another, just to make sure that they don't have to go. And at some point, it all becomes unimportant. It all becomes just numbers, just stats, just trying to figure out how to do it as fast as possible, as efficiently as possible. And before they knew it, there's an angry hot dino lizard trying to strangle them. Someone asked how did the memory heads work, and someone answered with nobody knows. We know less about them than Gaster. And to be honest, that's a pretty good summary of it. We don't fucking know. Okay, now it's too dark. No, normally for Let's Plays, I'd like put my curtains up completely and then turn on my room light, but that feels a bit too degenerate for this. I want you to see me as a little bit more alive. A big question I do have is, which had a greater hold on the timeline throughout the storyline, Alphys or Frisk? Because while Alphys is level 99 and Frisk hasn't even gotten to that level, Frisk can still take on the God of Hyperdeath at level 1. I suppose another question would be, now that Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4 have come out, does that at all make you want to go back and tweak Sans or other members of the cast with the context we now have, or are you satisfied with your interpretation with them? So, as I said before, Frisk is technically still the strongest in the universe, so they are still the ones who are in control of the resets. That's the whole reason why Alphys is on this killing spree in the first place, to like figure out how to overtake them and stuff. So in technicality, it's mostly still Frisk. As for the Deltarune question, the only thing that I want to kind of tweak in terms of like the questions I've answered, because it's technically not canon, but if there's one thing I would maybe change, the most important thing that's going to determine whether or not it is completely broken is if in Deltarune finally Papyrus shows up. And depending on how old Papyrus is in that universe, that could cause a few issues here and there. Because in my head, when I first did Dr. Megalo, first of all, I didn't think there was going to be anything like like a thing with Toriel and stuff going on. So in my head, I thought like, okay, maybe Sans is like, kind of, in his 30s or something when he gets like transported there, and Papyrus is like a little baby, like a tiny baby or something when he's like being transported. So he's like 10 or 12 or something. And there was a reference to that with Alphys asking about Papyrus in Out of Character. So the idea was that Papyrus is like really small. If Papyrus turns out to be the same age as he is in Undertale, like if he's still the tall ass skeleton, that causes a few issues. in terms of like timeline shenanigans. So that's not gonna be nice. Yeah, like Sans talks about how he gave up on going back a long time ago. So to me, that's like a really, really long time span in my head, and it would kind of ruin it if it was like not actually that long ago, you know? The only thing that I do want to change maybe is my mental image of how old Sans is. So in Dr. Megalo, I had him at first like 38 or something in my head, but then at some point I did say he's like 40 or something, and now I would maybe put it at either 43 or 45, just so that in my head there's like almost a 10-year gap between going from Deltarune to Undertale, and so it would need to be he would need to be either like 28 or like in his like very early 30s, so that the implications with Toriel don't come off as kind of creepy, you know? But then there's also a bigger problem, which is the whole fucking confusion as to whether or not monsters can bleed or not. Like Susie bleeds, but she also bleeds in the Dark World specifically, but she also knows how to handle blood. But then there's also this one monster who's like asking what it's like to be made of blood and stuff. So that implies that monsters are mostly made of dust still, or that they would still dust and stuff, that they don't have blood, and this obviously causes some continuity issues if Sans actually was supposed to bleed in that. Now, to be fair, when I made the whole ketchup thing in Dr. Megalo, that's not because I ever really thought it was ketchup. I do actually think it's blood, but you know, it was mostly a writing decision to really emphasize Sans's character in that moment, to like, you know, not take it too seriously and intentionally make a joke out of it. But if it turns out that it is actually blood, I was banking on this to never really be confirmed, you know? I was banking on that just kind of staying a mystery. But if it turns out that it is, in fact, canonically blood because he can bleed, this is causing a lot of issues that I am never going to be able to outlive. And at some point, you just gotta accept that this is just gonna be a relic of its time, right? You just gotta accept sometimes that sometimes things just are, and just accept it as an AU and not be completely canon accurate anymore, right? Yeah, sometimes you just have to face that. What do you see the Exile Squad doing with their exiles? So for Papyrus, Sans, and Frisk, I kind of did a little bit of little sketches here and there. For Alphys and Undyne, mostly they're just on a road trip. They're just going from state to state, having a nice hiking and stuff. Alphys getting a bit more into geology, and mostly getting kicked out all the time because Undyne is a force to be reckoned with, and sometimes that is being done in the most inconvenient times. What favorite popsicle flavor is yours for the Dr. Megalo cast? If I'm gonna be honest, when it comes to food, I never know how to answer that, and so my only response is Sans likes the blue flavor, Alphys likes the pink flavor, and Frisk likes the flavor that is just all of them. You know, the whole fucking rainbow. Does Papyrus love puns? Yes, but only his own. A few questions. I read the comic and I saw that Alphys can see the Gasterfog. Okay, bye. 2. How do the Skeleton Brothers and Flowey and MH provide for Frisk while they were growing up? Well, Flowey and MH don't really do anything. They're just kind of basically pets for Frisk. Frisk, while Flowey... even though Flowey doesn't see himself as a pet, he basically becomes the pet. He basically becomes a secondary pet. In terms of how they provide, like, Sans uses his hot dog stand, but he does sometimes actually go teach at schools here and there whenever they need like substitutes teachers. And Papyrus is mostly just going with Muffet's enterprise, so being a bit more on the go, just kind of helping to grow the business in some places. Yeah, that's basically how they provide it. Does the gang celebrate holidays like Halloween and Christmas? They do celebrate them, but for Christmas, there's at least 1 or 2 years where Sans intentionally gives Flowey and Frisk coal because... I mean, come on. Does the gang have a picture book of them and Frisk growing up over the years? Absolutely. They keep pictures all the time. They love them. You see why I don't want Soriel to become canon? Like, this is the kind of things that you're going to expect in the comments section, Mike. I'm like, oh my god. We know that Frisk sees Sans as a dad, or at the very least a parental figure, Sans with Papyrus, but what does Sans think about that? We know in the beginning he has mixed feelings, but does he see Frisk as his kid, or just a kid he adopted? I hope my question makes sense. Basically, I'm asking if Sans sees himself as their dad. So Sans wouldn't label himself as their dad, but he would label himself as their guardian for the most part. It's not until like where the Frisco is a lot older, and then there's like this one slip up about calling him dad, where he just kind of accepts it. Papyrus on the other hand is like waiting, just patiently to be called dad, you know? Either dad or mom. He accepts both labels. Do you think you'll ever include Deltarune into the story? Maybe not directly, but like pop-ups mentioned here and there, Deltarune characters are plot. So the Deltarune characters do exist in Dr. Megalo, as already established, but other than cameos, I don't think they would be taking too much of the plot itself. I don't think they would be too important within it. What is the coolest scrapped concept for Dr. Megalo that you had? So I don't know if this counts, but there were two small ideas I had. One where we would actually see Sans putting the implant into his head, which is not with any anesthetics. He had barely an hour to even make the machine in the first place, so you could probably tell that this was gonna be fucking brutal. But I decided that I wanted to not traumatize people too much, so I decided not to do that. The second thing I had in mind, which to be honest I'm glad I kind of scrapped it, was the idea that Sans would approach Frisk just before dying and tell them to stick around just one more time or something like that. Like in a very cold bastard way, but in a way that guarantees that Frisk gets a little curious. Reason I didn't put it in was mostly for time reasons, but to be honest, I feel like it would have been maybe a bit much. But the idea would have been that Sans would want to make sure that if he wants to correct himself, if he really wants to make sure that things do get better, that he's actually able to save the universe, he has to make sure that Frisk actually does come back the next timeline, and so to not risk that this would be like just by chance be their last genocide run, right? But at the same time, I feel like at this point they've said it so often, so there's no point in having that failsafe, to be honest. So I don't think it was necessary anymore. But it does feel it would have made for a really cool panel, right? Did Kara just silently watch the majority of the plot happen? How old was Kara? Kara, after a certain amount of resets, like I don't know if you remember this from the games, but it's like Kara barely really says anything other than, you know, perverted sentimentality. But in my head, Frisk would like start to kind of drown out their dialogue, and at some point Kara would just stop saying anything, and then just and they would just repeat the cycle without even thinking about it. They're both in like a kind of like a disassociating kind of state, where they're kind of there but also not at the same time. And it's really only in the Betrayal run where the neurons start to get activated, mostly because of their fucking getting fucking done with this bullshit, right? As for how old Kara is, the day they died, they were 10 years old, so they're like 1 year, like a 1 whole year older than Frisk. Why? I don't know. I feel like they need some differences, you know? More of a brain imagination teaser, but if the Undertale Yellow characters got wrapped up in Dr. Megalo events, how would they affect the story? I can imagine Suruba would be out for Frisk and Alpha's Bloodlust. Okay, so if Undertale Yellow was in there, first of all, I think Suruba would definitely be one of the Hotland monster bosses or something, instead of maybe the Megalomid, I think. Maybe she would like somewhat get wrapped up with the Undyne and Frisk lab situation. Maybe she would like turn out to be in that kind of group. But I think the tension would be a bit interesting between Undyne and Suruba specifically. I think it would be interesting in that. Martlet would probably just be in the shelter. Same thing with Starlo, I think. I think they would just be in the shelter and just helping out. Maybe Starlo would think about wanting to get out, but he would then get still convinced to like stay behind by Suruba anyway. I don't think they would do too much, but they would help out with the rescues here and there a bit more. Just giving additional help to Papyrus, basically. Sans has a blue and orange Gaster Blaster. Why does he have blue? Since, you know, he lost all his patience. So this is maybe a bit lame, but to me the eyes are not necessarily related to his magic powers. I think the eye is more related to, like, you know, magic activation, but whatever he feels the most is what his eye represents. So I don't think it necessarily influences his magic in itself. His color is still blue. Like, he still has the blue sweater, he still has the blue implant and all that. It's still his color. Just because my man's got some more will to live, that doesn't mean the depression is gone, you know? Also, it's supposed to be like a gold yellow, but gold yellow to me is like a nice mix between yellow and orange, so a lot of people thought it's orange, so sorry, I just really like that color. I'm sorry. How often in runs does the Mettaton notice there's something wrong with Alfie early? So the very first few times, Mettaton doesn't really see the other diary entries. He just opens up a blank page and stuff, and it's not until a few more times where he actually notices that there have been a few more entries that he doesn't remember. So I would say the first like 3 or 4 runs or something, he doesn't really notice it too much and just thought, oh, I didn't realize I wrote in this already, so let's just write in it more. And then somewhere afterwards he like notices, wait a minute, what are these dates? This is the same day. Why am I writing on from the same day? That's weird. And then starts to write a bit more specifically. But you know, every time it resets, so he doesn't really get too much more information. He just adds things that he had to do for this timeline that is different from the previous one. And he is unfortunately not very scientifically connected in this whole thing, so he's unfortunately doomed to well, you know what. Greetings, I'd like to ask a question. How exactly did Alphys make those mechanical tentacles? I've been curious about them because I find them sick and even took an inspo for a character of mine. Well, her tentacles are kind of controlled by her like little rings on her fingers, but they're also kind of also interacting with the belt that she also has, so that's like her power source and stuff. As for why I added them, I felt they're like it's in the notes, but it's like it's supposed to be like a little reference to Flowey's Flick's arms and stuff, so to be like really mocking towards them. But I mean, most people saw also that it was a very obvious reference to the Doc Ock. Like at first it wasn't supposed to be, but while I was drawing it, it was like, yeah, I see it. I've seen Spider-Verse too much. I can't unsee this now. How's Alphys alive? The glass went in her head. Well, they pierced her eyeballs, but they didn't really reach the brain just yet, so she was able to survive. But you know, it definitely didn't help getting brain damage there, you know, here and there. You know, I'm sure it's not helping. After Undyne kills herself trying to bring Alphys back in the next reset, it says that she's nowhere to be seen. Where did she go? Oh, you know, just a lovely vacation, you know? She's just really bad at sending postcards. 1. What's the status of Frisk and Melody's relationship? Will we get more of it in the future? 2. Outside of Undyne and Alphys and Frisk Melody, what other romantic the relationships are explored in Dr. Megalo? Could be one-sided or mutual? So Frisk and Melody was just kind of something I dumped into it just to show Frisk being able to like move on in their lives. It wasn't really meant to be like anything continuous, but people actually like Melody, so I don't know what to do about that, not gonna lie. So yes, and if I come up with stuff, maybe, but to be honest, I'd rather just focus on other things right now. As for the second question, as I said, it's mostly Undyne and Alphys. I like Matt Pap, and there's a little bit of something going on there, but it's also, I don't know, again, I don't really want to focus too much on that. And sorry, Al, I mean, if you want to imagine something, you can, but again, you're not gonna hear it being canon from me. Are you authorizing us viewers to create fan art and fan comics? Oh yeah, absolutely. Just go wild with it, no matter whatever you want to do. Second, how are Sans and Pap getting used to Exile Life? Oh, they're pretty okay with it. They're not too happy about how they can't really see the monsters too many times. Like, yes, they can come back to the monster community. It's not like they don't ever visit, but there's, you know, they have to take care of Frisk and Flowey and all that. They can't just go back all the time, so they have to like reschedule all the time when they actually can meet like people like Grillby or Mettaton and all that stuff. It's a full schedule, you know. So there's a little bit of melancholy on that regard, but they do meet Alphys almost pretty frequently, so it's not like they're completely alone in that, and you know, they're having fun, you know, despite the circumstances. Question, so in your words, you said Frisk is role-playing as Kara in all of the Jenna runs, and during the Who's Frisk combo, they break a little being asked about themselves, so as in role-playing as Kara, do they have an ongoing identity crisis, neglecting themselves and who they once were, not knowing who they are anymore, with emotional discourse and inner turmoil? Yes. The reason I went with the idea of them role-playing as Kara is because I think it goes a little bit with the funny thing that the people do, which is blaming Kara for everything when they play Undertale and stuff. So it's like they can like put a new identity on themselves, because there is a reason why we learn about Frisk's name in the Pacifist run, but not in the Jenna run, and I feel like them repeatedly doing the genocide run, they basically take over this role of what they think Kara is. Now, of course, Kara is not them. They're also a completely different entity to them as well. And, you know, they're not exactly being completely canon accurate to Kara themselves either, but it's like they want to basically complete a role that's not them. And anytime they think about who they used to be, who they actually were on the surface, it's not fun. No likey. They do not like that at all. They are not happy with that. Okay, last but not least, we have the Twitter questions as well. I thought there was also on Blue Sky, but there was only someone asking Doctor Who. Since Sans running out of patience removes the cyan blue parts of Sans's glowing eye, would other strong emotions, as perseverance, determination, kindness, etc. be able to manifest inside his glowing eye magic? And secondary question, what happens to Jerry after Dr. Megalo? So, as said, the eye doesn't have anything to do with the magic in itself, but he would, if he had any more dominant traits of him, it would definitely change. So if he had like an immense amount of kindness in him, he definitely would, that dominant trait would probably also shine through with it being green and stuff, and or red or stuff. No, so yes, it is possible, but you know, it's I think he's too lazy to go with any other personality trait, if I'm gonna be honest. Can I marry Alphys? Like the general concept of Dr. Megalo Alphys? Yes, sure. Canonically, you're gonna have to need a word with Undyne. Knowing what we know now about Gerson now, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like he, Sans, and Undyne just went to Alphys, she would lose, no shade. Okay, so in hindsight, having Deltarune and Gerson be actually fucking packed, like, sure, that was kind of the idea when doing the whole Hotland segment with Gerson doing the whole escorting, like, he's wielding a fucking hammer, of course he's, like, fucking busted, but I didn't realize how much busted he would be, not gonna lie. So yeah, that removes a little bit of the suspense of disbelief, not gonna lie, so whoops. Can I marry Matt Mew Mew? Sure, but just know that she's going to visit Undyne and Papyrus every once in a while, if we're talking about post-finale, so it's like, you're not gonna see her much. How'd you feel when people started liking you? Honestly, very, very, very surprised, because I wasn't sure how people would take, like, evil Alphys, you know? Does Sans ever talk to his blasters if he's ever alone and just wants the company? What I like to think is that Sans sometimes likes to go outside of the van or outside the shelter, if we're talking about within the storyline, and he just kind of sits on one of the blasters while smoking or something and just looking at the ceiling or sky or something. Something about that seems like very relaxing. Not the smoking. I'm pretty sure the smoking is not good for you, even for a skeleton, but you know, it's a chill thought. It's a chill time. Whether he actually talks to it, I'm not sure whether or not I want the blasters to be like independent sentient beings or just an attack he does. I think it's better if it's just an attack he does, because at the moment it becomes like an actual pet, I feel like it's like bring up some questions, you know? Yeah, excluding the whole thing with Dustel, what were your other inspirations, ideas for creating this AU? I'm gonna be very real with you. Normally I'd be able to tell you my inspirations pretty clearly. This is one of those things that actually has me stumped. As I said, I was just brainstorming this whole thing, so whatever influence I had, I just completely forgot. But if I had to say something a bit more definitive, probably the community in itself, because people like kept on bringing also suggestions in the replies, and while I didn't necessarily always take them like word for word what they suggested, they still gave quite an inspiration. So honestly, the biggest inspiration I got was from you guys, honestly. Let the fandom inspire each other and make fantastic stories, is what I would say. Dr. Megalo is a huge and creative, amazing project. You've really made your mark on the fandom. Do you think you'll be able to do something like this again? Are there more projects you have in mind or planning on moving forward, or something next new? I know you had... To be honest, one of the reasons, except the reason I said before with Millwar, is that I feel like Dr. Megalo is just a superior story in and of itself. So I feel like in comparison, it feels like it's falling a little flat. That as for the previous thing, because I'm not sure how much of a mark I made on the fandom, but I'm glad to hear that there's something about it. As for if I can make a project like this ever again, I have no idea. Like, there was Millennium Dust Tale as an idea for an actual Dust Tale take, but to be honest, it has me a bit stumped on like the actual story structure. Like with Dr. Megalo, it was pretty easy what I wanted things to be because I kind of had the heart of it in mind, but for that one, I'm not sure what the heart really is, you know, the point of making this story, because so far the main point was to just make a Dust Tale take in that one. Like Dr. Megalo had a little bit more interesting going on because of this whole beef with Sans and Alphys. Like I felt like there was a bit more thematic meat to it, right? Well, Dust Tale, Millennium Dust Tale is a little more difficult to figure out because I want Papyrus to be important, and something's just not clicking, you know? Short answer, hopefully. Has Alphys ever actually gotten close to killing Sans or on certain occasions? Oh yeah, many times. I mean, the whole thing with the Sailor Doom thing almost got him killed pretty consistently. In fact, the very first fight, you know, the one where he has like he's running out of patience. He actually loses that fight. I know it might sound lame, especially because of how iconic this quote has gotten, but the whole thing is that Sans clearly asks for help from everyone because he knows he can't do it on his own completely. And so the very first fight, like they're going pretty toe to toe. Like to spoil a little bit the idea of the fight, they go pretty toe to toe with Sans's method of fighting and her method of fighting. And her, like, you know, fucking crashing out on him. But there is a moment in the middle of the fight where her magic disturber finally gets activated, and he is completely incapacitated because in Judgment Hall, it is at the most closest to that magic disturber, and that gets him almost killed immediately. And it's only really because of certain circumstances that he gets out of it at some point, which I'm not gonna spoil, but I mean, if you've been on Twitter, you might remember a spoiler of how it ends, but that's not important. Nothing matters until it's actually out there, you know? But to answer the question, yes, he does actually occasionally get very close to dying. He might be Sans Undertale, but he's also still just one man, you know? You gotta remember sometimes. Man still only got 1 HP. Man's struggling. Is Sans single? Canonically, yes. In my fantasy land, no. What happens if Dr. Megalo first gives up? Wouldn't ever happen, of course, but what if they just decide to stop trying and die? Pretty similar to what I said before, that she would just be able to succeed in her mission to overtake their determination and just destroy everything, right? What were your main inspirations with the AU, and did you ever talk with anyone who made other Dust Tale related things since the AU started as a Dust Tale rewrite? So I'm going to ignore the first question, but I will answer the second. So this is a me thing. I'm pretty introverted, so I don't really talk to many people about like different story concepts, which honestly is something I should do, but I just don't. It's not that I didn't know too much about Dust Tale when I decided to start working on it, but to be honest, I was also kind of intentionally not looking too much into it, and therefore it started to become a little bit more its own thing, and I'm happy about that, to be honest. Not to say that you shouldn't talk to other creators to get like inspirations and like more ideas and stuff, but I feel like Dust Tale as a concept is very centered around Sans, which is, you know, the whole concept. Like a Dust Tale is Sans centered. And I think due to that, it's, I think, better to like focus on just other ways to make, especially like the amalgamates and alphas important, that is a bit divorced from that, if that makes any sense. What would be the player reaction if this happened to their game? Like the actual person playing the game? And I sometimes think about that, and it would be the funniest shit ever. Like, imagine you're just casually playing Genocide, and you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna reboot it again, see what happens, and then everything is just fucking different like everything. It's just, it'd be so fucking funny. How did it feel to be a creator of a big AU and just get your idea out there? It's great because I've had a lot of AU ideas before, and it's kind of weird how this was the one that actually stuck, because every other AU idea I had was actually very Frisk and Sand-centered before already. In a platonic matter, to make it very clear. It's always been about like the Bone Brothers in some shape or form, or Frisk specifically, just because I wanted to explore who Frisk is outside of what we actually see in the game a little bit. I'm glad this is the one that sticks, however, because this one obviously has a little bit more meat to it, and it's great. It's great after all these years of like failed attempts. This one actually works. Will we ever get the entire story in one big long comic? No, because as I said already, I have too much of a bias towards Sans, and I feel like that will shine through no matter what I do. So I feel like if I tried to make a comic, it would center a bit too much around him again, and I wouldn't want that when the biggest appeal for people has been about how Alphys gets like some time to shine as well. Which segment did you have the most fun writing, the most trouble? Definitely the moment Sans has a sailor's mouth. That particularly was so difficult to get myself through, because I had to keep fighting in my head. Is this canon accurate? Am I okay? Is it okay for him to be this out of character here? And then I think this is the moment where I decided this chapter has to be called out of character, so I can like cover my ass a little bit. Of course, there's like some thematic reasoning as to why it's called that, but at the same time, it's like, if someone tells me that this is out of character, congratulations, you have figured out the point. When it comes to characters swearing, especially when it's like from characters that you don't hear swearing a lot, it's very easy to make it come off as like Vivzy Poppy or something, and I can't really tell anybody if they see it exactly as that, to like say like harumph, you missed a point or something. Like if someone feels like it's still too much, then it's too much for them. But it's the whole point is that he's like held back so much of his anger throughout all these resets and all that, and his whole frustration about it, and his existential crisis, that just having this moment to really burst that bubble of chill that he had before, it really emphasizes how much he's held back over all these resets and stuff, and I mean, there's a specific reason why I also made Papyrus like have this one singular swear word at this one spot, only for Sans to be swearing in that very spot as well, again, just to really show how much he's held back for the sake of his own brother as well, in that way. I'm really glad that people really liked this scene, because I was really unsure how people were going to react to it. Like, I remember tweeting about it, like being worried as to how this is definitely the most fanny I've ever written Sans. But you kind of need a moment like this, right? Like I said before, you need to break his canon self first before you can really transition into the fanon side of things. And I feel like this is definitely the moment that needed to happen for it to actually transition to that. So I'm really glad that this worked out. What happened meanwhile Frisk and Flowey was gone? How monsters and humans became friends or got accepted? So the way I imagine it is that Asgore and Toriel had to basically become the ambassadors for monsters instead of Frisk, and had to basically have this whole conversation with like the human monster race. I think this is just one of those things you just can't overthink, because if you think about it in a realistic term, then yeah, the political stuff, it's gonna be a fucking mess. So trying to make it a realistic political drama in that kind of way is just going to miss the point entirely, because I feel like it's just so much stuff that you have to consider that at this point you just gotta give up and just accept that, okay, in this universe, humans just saw the monsters, had a nice peace agreement, and just talked it out, and everything was fine. Realistically, will never fucking happen if we look at the state of the world, of course, but this is just one of those things that if you put too much focus on it, you're just kind of losing yourself a little bit in it, and also it kind of ruins the pacifist ending as well in Undertale if you overthink it too much as well. Because they're like, how's all happily ever after in the surface, everything is finally okay, and then suddenly there's like, well, actually, let's bring racism back into it, right? Let's bring political drama into it, and like, no, I'm not doing that. Okay, so I hope you can still see it, but this is a bit of a longish one, so here we go. How does Alphys find the Spamton sweepstakes? Okay, I get her finding a website, sure, why not, but the Spamton sweepstakes, is it just canon that Darkness are just magically Lightners and the Spamton is just hosting a really shitty sweepstake, or is it just a random sweepstake she found out about, like, Jerry or something? No, or another idea I had was if we believe Gaster made Deltarune, it is just a game he published on Steam using monsters. Yeah, published on Steam using monsters that people can see around town now, post barrier breaking. It's kind of funny imagining a 7-year-old going, "Oh my god, it stands from Deltarune and Soy Jacket," and this is sweepstake, just a website he made to go alongside it. And if that's the case, what about the Tony Fox joke made in it? Does he hire Tony Fox and Tammy to help him make Deltarune? Is Laura Shigihara just teleported into the void and Gaster goes, "Hey, can you record a song about my hit indie game Deltarune?" Does Gaster just post job listings and teleport people into the void when they have to clock in? This might just be an insane rambling of a madman who twitches when they hear the word friend, but I've dug myself into this hole and it's like a 7-10 hole, so I'm just gonna stay here. Okay, so for those who didn't pay attention to one of the notes, a long time coming, there's a moment where Sans looks at the code, and this was originally supposed to be the Undertale code that Sans finds, but me being the tech illiterate dumbass that I am, just searched up Undertale code and didn't realize that the image I was copying was of the website of the Spamton sweepstakes. Yeah, that was not my smartest moment. Okay, so to just answer this question, I'll try my best to explain it as best as I can. So, in the world building of Dr. Megalo, there's basically 3 universes to take into account. One is the entity's main universe, the one who's like overseeing Undertale and Deltarune in some way. You could see this as the player's universe or something, but don't think about the player. Don't fucking bring up the player. Just think about it like a different entity that is able to view into these worlds. And Undertale and Deltarune are 2 worlds that are comprised completely of code, right? And if we take in this Spamton sweepstakes into this, you could see it as almost like an extension of Deltarune's code that connects to the entity's world, if that makes any sense. It doesn't, but just pretend it makes sense, right? Alphys hadn't quite found these codes yet. She hadn't quite figured out that these are connected with code at all. What she does, however, find in her research is like a hint to how, like a clue as to how their world is, what their world is comprised of, and it gives a little hint as to how to access it. And both Alphys and Sans think that it's like it's a little bit simplified, and that there's actually more to it. That it isn't just code. That it's just almost just a clue. So Sans, without her input, decides to look into this code to see what else he can find, only to direct him into just code. And that's what messes him up completely, right? Like he thinks that the code is just an oversimplification of something way more complicated, only to realize, no, wait, that's all it is. And you know, there is something a little fucked up about being able to like access a website derivative of the world that you used to come from. Like there's some accidental horror mixed into it. So if we were to kind of put a band-aid on this fuck up I did, then yeah, there you go. That's your explanation. Dude, where's Birdly? Birdly is learning everything he can about the shelter by asking Asgore like a bajillion questions and then regurgitating everything that he's learned to other people, like the little autistic little bird that he is. On an encounter with Frisk and Alphys, if Frisk were to somehow no-hit all our attacks, would that make Alphys progressively angry until Sans rescues? Look, you just answered the question yourself. That is basically what's happening. Okay, legit question time. How would Dr. Megalo work in other Undertale AU timelines like story swap, normal swap, fell swap, auto swap? Would a fell swap of Megalo be a pretty chill, calm person? Would swap first version of Megalo be Undyne? To be honest, I'm not quite sure how it would work with Underfell, because the whole point is that Alphys becomes like crazy in order to like overtake Frisk and then become the evil scientist. So I'm not quite sure how that would translate in a Fel version too much. I do, however, think that if it goes into a similar kind of direction, that Sans would have a much harder time to convince people to get back to the shelter. Like in a normal Undertale Dr. Megalo timeline, it would be like, yeah, of course we want to get the fuck out. Someone's killing an entire population. Please help me. But in Fel, it would probably be a lot harder to convince people to take it seriously or to even think that it would be a problem because they think that they could probably take on alphas themselves or something. So I think there would be a much bigger journey of how to actually, you know, connect with the community and try to unite them in spite of all this thing. I think Asgore is kind of evil in this as well, like actually evil. So I think that's also like a problem to deal with. So I don't think he would willingly give the shelter away either. So I'm not quite sure how it would work. So if someone knows Underfell really well and has like a bachelor's degree in Dr. Megalo, you can try to figure out how that works. You have the document for it. For Underswap, I'm also not quite sure how that would work. And the Mafia tale, I'm also not quite sure. However, one really interesting AU take of Dr. Megalo would be Story Shift, because that would be basically, I think it's Asgore who's basically taking the place of Alphys, and I think that would create so much delicious drama with Karos taking the place of Sans. Like that is just family drama. That is just peak family drama. Like that I would actually want to see this. This sounds so good. Please, someone make that. That sounds so fantastic. Hey yo, where did you get the name for this AU? Honestly, I'm the kind of person to try to think of a placeholder, and that placeholder just becomes the title. Now, Dr. Megalo is also just a really catchy title. Like, obviously Doctor because of Alphys, and Megalo because I am not creative at all. And, you know, in isolation, Dr. Megalo is a really fucking cool name. Terrible. Terrible to search with, though. Anytime I write Dr. Megalo, you occasionally, like, see people having discussions about, like, Megalodon or something, which I'm not quite sure what that's about. And then I think there was actually Dr. Astronomus or whatever from the Earthbound hack or something that actually is, I think, called Dr. Megalo for some reason. I think once in a while, at least that's what it gets associated with. So it is a fantastic name in isolation. Terrible to search for, though. Is Sans Dr. Megalo Undertale Sans Dr. Megalo Deltarune? Yes, that's the idea of it. I really hope, Toby doesn't confirm too many other things, otherwise the AU is just screwed. And I think this is the last question. Since Frisk had repeated the Geno timeline over 204 times via resetting, I feel like they would have some type of loss of time. I mean, they're resetting a bunch of times in Geno, and each Geno run takes, what, about a day to complete, and since there's no sun, it's kind of hard to tell how long. So I answered this on Twitter before, but just to make it clear, yes, they do in fact lose their sense of time. In the sense that a run takes about a day, but the way they perceive it is basically the original length of the Undertale timeline. So the average Geno run is actually, in reality, would be a day, but they perceive it as the total playtime, which is 2 hours, right? Which makes it very funny because a lot of people consider Frisk a speedrunner in this. So they basically in their head think it's like much shorter than it actually is. So that must be really, really funny to realize that their sense of time is just completely distorted. So yeah, that does it about with the questions. I'm sorry this is like a bit lame as like an anniversary thing. I had something else planned, but then things just kind of didn't work out. But thank you anyway for watching. I hope I get to do a few more little things with Dr. Megalo, because I haven't really been able to add things to it in quite a few months, and I hope you had at least a little bit of fun of it. And I wish you a good rest of until September 15th, because I swear to God, something is coming. I can smell it, Toby. Have a nice day, and, well, bye. I'll figure out how to do outros one of these days. Today is not the day.